The first thing that fell from the sky looked like snow. Cleveland, October 1944. A warm Friday afternoon. And yet, soft white flakes were drifting silently into the streets. Children laughed, reaching out to catch them on their tongues. Mothers stepped onto porches to watch the autumn sky. It was beautiful. It was rock wool, shredded insulation, from the inside of a liquefied natural gas tank that had been quietly tearing itself apart for the last 10 minutes, half a mile away. And those children had less than 40 seconds left. Before they could even scream, the ground beneath their feet turned inside out. Every iron manhole cover within a square mile launched into the sky like artillery shells. A roaring wall of fire 10 stories tall tore down the asphalt, climbing up through the pipes and detonating directly inside people's basement drains. In 10 minutes, a thriving American neighborhood was completely erased. 130 people were dead. 53 of them were charred so severely, reduced to ash and bone fragments, that 1944 forensic science could never establish who they were. This is the forensic story of the day a modern city was burned from the inside out. The day the sewers exploded. Before we step into that wall of fire, 3 impossible truths. 1. When the mushroom cloud climbed into the sky over Cleveland, people miles away thought America had been bombed. A thermal wave of 3,000 degrees tore through the streets. A full year before Hiroshima, Cleveland looked like an atomic city. 2. The fire didn't come down the street, it came up through the drains, up through kitchen sinks, up through bathtubs. People died inside their own homes, burned from below. And 3. The men who built the tank knew it could fail. They built it anyway. Cleveland, Ohio, October 20th, 1944. The city was the beating heart of the American war machine. Factories ran day and night. Bombshells, steel, ball bearings, trucks, everything the boys overseas needed. They called it the arsenal of democracy. And to keep those factories running, you needed gas. The East Ohio Gas Company had built something the world had never seen before. The first commercial liquefied natural gas plant ever. The idea was simple. Chill the gas to minus 260 degrees. It shrinks, 600 times smaller than its normal volume, 600 to 1. Then you can store it, massive amounts of it, ready for winter, ready for the war. It was a marvel of American engineering, cutting edge, untested. And it sat just steps from a working-class neighborhood. Row after row of small wooden houses, families, immigrants, kids walking to school. That afternoon was a Friday. The Sabbath was hours away. Across the neighborhood, housewives were scrubbing floors, polishing tables, setting out candles, preparing the homes that in less than an hour would no longer exist. The killer was not the gas. The killer was a tank, specifically tank number 4. Built in 1942, cylindrical, massive, holding 1.1 million gallons of liquid gas, enough to power a small city. But here's the problem. The proper steel for storing something at minus 260 degrees was stainless steel, tough, ductile, designed to stay flexible in extreme cold. But it was wartime. Stainless steel was rationed, reserved for guns, ships, tanks. So the engineers made a compromise. They built the inner shell of tank number 4 from a cheaper alloy, 3.5% nickel steel. They believed it would hold. It would not. At minus 260 degrees, 3.5% nickel steel becomes brittle. Not weak, brittle. As brittle as glass. You could tap it with a hammer and it would shatter. And here's where it gets worse. Right next door to the tank was the New York Central Railroad. Heavy freight trains, locomotives shaking the ground all day, every day. And on the other side, a bombshell stamping plant. Massive industrial presses slamming steel 1,000 times an hour. The bombs of war were shaking the tank that held the gas. For 2 years, those vibrations crept through the brittle steel, crack by tiny crack. The tank was already dying, quietly, patiently. Nobody knew. 2:30 in the afternoon, a laboratory worker on site noticed something. A faint, white vapor curling out of a seam on tank number 4. He couldn't have known, but that was the moment the tank gave up. The inner shell had cracked. Liquid gas, colder than anything that should exist on Earth, was now touching the outer shell. A shell made of standard carbon steel, not built for cold either. It started to fail too. The vapor drifted in the breeze from Lake Erie, heavier than air. It flowed downhill like a river you couldn't see, into curbs, into gutters, into storm drains, down into the city's sewers. And around the neighborhood, that fine white insulation began to drift from the sky like snow. The children kept laughing. 2:40 p.m., 10 minutes after the first leak, the gas in the sewer system found a spark. The world ended. A wall of fire 10 stories tall ripped through the streets. The blast was so violent that Captain Albert Zahler of the Cleveland Fire Department later said his men were tossed about like feathers in a wind. Not knocked back, not thrown, tossed. Like feathers. That was the brisance, the shattering force of the explosion. A thermal wave of 3,000 degrees. A mushroom cloud climbing into the Cleveland sky. People miles away thought the country had been attacked. A full year before Hiroshima, this is what an atomic city looked like. But the worst part wasn't above ground. It was below. The sewers acted like gun barrels. The fire channeled through them, picking up speed, hunting for the next exit. Up through manhole covers, up through basement drains, up through bathtubs. People who had run home thinking they were safe were suddenly trapped inside fires that started under their feet. At East 61st and St. Clair, a fire truck rolled in to fight the flames. A 25-foot pumper, pumper number 19. A second underground explosion blew the street open beneath it. A crater, 25 feet deep, 60 feet long. The truck dropped into the crater, rear end first. The street had eaten it. 20 minutes after the first explosion, it got worse. The fire had been licking the support legs of a neighboring spherical tank. Those legs were uninsulated, just bare steel. They softened in the heat, then they buckled. The sphere fell over. 1 million more gallons of gas spilled out, ignited instantly. The second fireball took whatever the first one had missed. Inside the homes, the Sabbath Fires were beginning. A survivor told the Associated Press, "Within a split second after the explosion, our homes and clothes were on fire." Imagine that. You're cleaning your kitchen, the radio is on, the sink starts to scream fire. That was the world. The death toll could have been worse, much worse, but the local schools were still in session. Teachers kept the children inside. Quiet, calm, away from the streets where the fire was hunting. The children in those schools lived. Their mothers, at home preparing the Sabbath, did not. When it was over, Cuyahoga County Coroner Dr. Samuel Gerber arrived at what was left. He said the temperatures had been hot enough to incinerate human flesh and calcify bone. That was his way of telling the city the truth. The truth was that 53 people had been reduced to ash and bone fragments. 1944 forensic science had no way to put names to what remained. No DNA tests, no dental records they could match, no fingerprints to lift, just charred remains and silence. The mass funeral was held on November 14th, a single grave in Highland Park Cemetery for 61 victims, most of them strangers, even in death. 55 of the dead were employees of East Ohio Gas. The company had killed its own, and the survivors lost more than their families. Many had lived through the Great Depression. They didn't trust banks. They kept their life savings in their homes, in jars, in drawers, under floorboards. Everything they had ever earned, burned with everything they had ever loved. Here's the part that should make you angry. The United States Bureau of Mines investigated, and they found exactly what you might expect. The tank had failed because of low temperature embrittlement. The 3.5% nickel steel had simply not been good enough. The vibrations from the railroad and the bombshell plant had accelerated the cracks. The partial dike had been useless. The neighborhood had been too close. All of this was known. The engineers had known the steel would be weaker. They believed it would hold. They were wrong. But they took the risk because the war effort needed the gas. 130 civilians on the home front died for steel that was rationed for the war. They didn't fall on a battlefield. They fell scrubbing kitchen floors, reaching for their children, walking home from work. The company paid $3 million to the neighborhood, $500,000 to the families of the 55 dead employees. It rebuilt homes. It refused to rebuild the plant in the same location, but no one was charged. Because no law had been broken. A wartime compromise had killed them, not a crime, just a decision. The first commercial LNG plant in the world became the worst LNG disaster in history. The industry collapsed for decades. Nobody trusted it anymore. America stopped storing natural gas above ground. The new standard became underground storage, salt caverns, reservoirs. Engineers studied Cleveland obsessively. They figured out the science. They mandated new materials. Today, every cryogenic LNG tank in the world is built with 9% nickel steel, not 3.5. The lesson cost 130 lives. The neighborhood was rebuilt. The company still operates today under a different name. And in Highland Park Cemetery, that mass grave still holds 53 people whose names nobody knows. If invisible killers fascinate you, I broke down another one. A Boeing 737 that flew for 3 hours with everyone on board already unconscious. Helios 522. It's linked below. LNG tanks are everywhere in America today, thousands of them. They power your stove, your heat, your hot water. They're safer than they were in 1944, much safer. They're safer because of Cleveland. Because one Friday afternoon in October, rock wool fell from the sky like snow. Because a wisp of vapor escaped a tank that should never have been built. Because the gas that heated their homes came up through their drains. And because 130 people learned, in 10 minutes, what happens when the things that keep us alive start to fail. The killer is rarely loud. It's almost always already inside. Subscribe, stay curious, and next time you hear a hiss from the drain, look closer.